Hello, everyone, and welcome to the stream. I wanted to just come on today for a somewhat informal stream. Been a bit busy for a few weeks and wanted to reestablish our weekend streams. Hopefully, we'll have some more time to do them going forward. I'm optimistic about that. Um, the last month scheduling on the weekend has been a bit messed up for me and just hasn't worked. So today I have a couple of topics in mind that I wanted to go into, but also I want to be available here to answer questions if anyone wants to raise any things they've been thinking about. I am open to answering questions, and Josephus might join me in a few minutes if he's able to also respond. So so I mentioned in my Patreon that I have been spending a lot of time trying to flesh out and get to the bottom of a particular issue in the Song of the Sea analysis, comparing it to the Battle of the Ten Kings Rig Veda hymn. And so that's one of the topics on my mind, which I'd really like to present some of that information to people who have been following along, to my patrons as well as others. So if it seems logical to go into that, I will present the basic outline of that. Also have some material on Yama, the Yama type god, to continue our deity chart myth streams that we've been doing. So if that comes together, if that seems more interesting to people, we can go into that. And like I said, hopefully Josephus will join and we could have a discussion on that. But we'll see how it goes. So yeah, it's really just I want to get this kind of reestablished in my schedule and see what kinds of things people have questions about, and that sort of thing. So since it seems like Josephus is going to be a few extra minutes, I might just well, first of all, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat and we could address those. But if not, then I think I'll start looking at the Song of the Sea information. And so, yeah, I know this is only a subset of people who are interested in this topic, but it's what's been occupying my time lately in my research. So I'd like to share what I've been finding and looking at. So essentially, when I analyze the Song of the Sea, to my own satisfaction, I've been convinced that it is a direct adaptation of Rig Veda 7.18, the Battle of the Ten Kings hymn, the main Battle of the Ten Kings hymn, meaning that it's adapting from that already composed hymn, somehow gotten from the Rig Veda, either a direct translation from the Vedic hymn, transcription, transliteration, summary, whatever it was. This some kind of copy was acquired by whoever authored the version in Exodus. And so I think that's established pretty well by what we've already gone into. But one thing was really puzzling and really okay, thanks. I'll start. I'll just answer questions if they pop up as well. I don't mind. So I am familiar with Russell Gurmurkin's works on Plato and the Old Testament. Yes, I find them very interesting. I haven't read his book on Plato in depth. I've only just kind of glanced in at certain kind of searching through keywords, so I don't know all the detail of his argument. But I've been kind of back and forth, sort of swayed by it, by the gist. I've looked into his Berosus Berosus and Manetho book a bit more actually, and I found it, it was very compelling material. But I'm also kind of new to the topic, so I don't know a lot of the back and forth debate about some of the points. But I kind of just am coming at it from the comparative mythology side and seeing what that tells me. And it has a strong, it chimes very strongly with Gomurkin's thesis that it's a late composition. But there are some things that from that angle, from the comparative mythology angle, that are starting to make me think that there's a definite gap, some kind of gap of understanding or intentionality between the Hebrew version, the original version of the material gotten adapted from the Indian sources. So the basic Exodus and Genesis stories that they wrote. There's a gap between that first composition moment and the Septuagint in some really important points, which is something I've also been looking at recently. Meaning that, to me, the idea that they were composed at the exact same time by the same people is starting to fall apart from the comparative mythology angle. So that kind of is making me think that Gomurkin putting them as one project might not be correct. But again, there's different ways to look at that. If you have a 10-year-long project of adapting something where translating it into Greek is the final phase, there could be a break in the chain of how they wanted to adapt things. The people in year 1 could have written it one way, and then the people in year 10 could have sort of misunderstood what the team in year 1 was thinking when they wrote it down. Things like that, you know what I mean? If I picture that concept as kind of like when we see movies being produced for 10 years in the modern day. Sometimes the team that was writing and producing, and even the director, might be different in the first year of the project, and then in year 10 maybe they've gone through 3 different directors, and now the movie's going in a different direction, and they're changing the direction of things. So there's ways to make that work, but also the necessity of that having happened, that Gomurkin wants to push, kind of also falls apart. It's not necessary for it to be all one project if you see strong disagreements between the Hebrew and then how it was translated. So I know scholars have looked at those points in other places, but there are a couple of interesting ones that I've just been looking at from the comparative mythology standpoint. So the burning bush one is one that I've also been talking about in my Patreon. And when I get around to making a full burning bush video, I'll actually explain what I'm talking about more precisely. But essentially, to my own satisfaction, I have found, and it seems to be the case, that the word for the burning bush it never originally meant bush. It never meant anything sharp or pointed or thorny originally in the Hebrew word. And I think that it originally was a word for a palm frond midrib, which is it's used in Egyptian iconography as a ritual item that can symbolize the year or eternity, sort of like a world column, kind of like a miniature one or a stand-in one, alternate one. In any case, this is a tangent I'm going off on now, but just to answer the Gomurkin question, I have to explain that it seems to me, based on comparative mythology angle, what you can reveal just from this little niche is that there's probably the Indian adaptation that I'm proposing was translating the burning linga and the burning linga appears inside a flaming pillar. In the Exodus scene, you have the burning. Let's see. It is a heart of flame. The word for either a heart of flame or a flame of flame. But I believe, I go with the translation that it's a heart of flame. So that's debated. And it appears inside the Seneh, the burning bush, so to speak. And when you see what the source is that it's being adapted from, it is the linga appearing inside of the pillar. In the Exodus version, it is a heart of flame appearing inside of what has been translated as a bush. But I'm saying that it's actually this pillar word, which, anyways, I'll go into that in a much more satisfying video. But this is a reason why I'm sort of steering away from fully believing what Gemerkin put down, because if there was a sort of change in the understanding of the original Hebrew word there, where it originally didn't mean bush, but it kind of was conflated with similar words that meant bush over time, and then in the Septuagint it gets translated as batos, meaning a thorn bush. That means that the people writing down the adaptation of the Indian story into the Hebrew originally had one idea about this being a burning column, a burning pillar, and then the Septuagint translators very clearly believed the word meant bush. So there's a gap there. Okay, so that's a long answer, and hopefully not too hard to follow, but this leads me to think that the original adaptation may have been more like, in the Persian period, like a lot of people have proposed, so a little bit earlier, and then there is a gap of understanding until the Septuagint. The alternate way to look at that question is that if you really think it's Hellenistic, it's possible the Septuagint was actually being worked on later, and that particular translation came about later, and there's a gap. There has to be some kind of gap of understanding or intentionality from the angle that I'm looking at, and I'll go into that more in the future. So, any other questions so I can discuss something that is, less confusing, maybe. It's all confusing, right? So, but that's what's fun about it. Hey, welcome, Mr. Pizzio and Arno and James Fields. Yes, happy 2026. It would be consistent with later events in Exodus, where God appeared in a pillar of smoke and fire. Yeah. So there's a different word for the pillar of fire that God appears in outside of that scene, which is also interesting. So what I'm saying is that there's this Akkadian word, sinu, S-I-N-U, sinu, and it is well established that it means palm frond midrib. Which is a well-known cultic item, which, like in Egyptian as well as in some Semitic cases, it's a pillar symbol. So you have right there this word sinu, which scholars have already connected to the word in the Bible as a word to compare it to. It is this pillar word. So I'm saying that's the more likely original meaning. Stamba. Yeah, exactly. So there is this candidate out there that scholars know about, which means palm frond midrib, and it's a pillar image. And I'm saying it's in the exact place where a pillar word appears in the original source. So it should have actually been that from the Indian adaptation angle, of course, right? Okay. So, but the interesting thing is that word is sinu in Akkadian, and it is seneh in the Hebrew, as far as I know how to pronounce it, and or saneh, and the word the word for the pillar or column in other places in Exodus, it's a different word, which I won't really try to pronounce. Maybe Josephus knows Hebrew. They're asking me Hebrew questions. Anyways,
good evening to everyone. Let's see if I can help with Hebrew.
but anyways, yeah, I just told everyone that I'll answer whatever questions you guys want to talk about. It's a really interesting topic. It wasn't the tangent I was thinking we'd go off on, but it is also one I've been thinking about lately, so it's fine. But yeah, I was saying how in the Indian adaptation theory, right, we have this word Akkadian Sinu, which is well established. Its meaning is palm frond midrib, which is a pillar symbol, and the Hebrew word is like Seneh. So that was my theory I presented, that it probably is related to that word instead of the Bush words that have been sort of projected onto it. But the point that I was getting to was somebody mentioned that God also appears in a pillar of fire elsewhere in Exodus, but it is and then I was saying it is actually a different word for pillar in those places though, and that's, I don't really know how to pronounce it, but it's like what was it? It's like Amud or something like that. Yeah.
Do you know the letters of the Hebrew spelling? I can look it up on Strong's Concordance.
Yeah, it is like Amud. So Ammud with a little line under the D, and then Esh for fire. So yeah, it's like Amud or Amuth maybe.
Okay, I have the word. If I will share my screen and you can see now the entry on the Strong's Concordance dictionary, which is the
Sounds
one
good.
usually used by biblical scholars. Okay,
Right.
should be this one. Okay, Amud,
Adding
a
it.
column or a platform. Pillar. Okay, so more or less the same meaning in every passage. Okay, also used of the bronze pillars. I think it's the ones in the Temple of Jerusalem, the famous two columns that have been overused as a symbol by esoterists, at least in some currents.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the pillars of the earth, so the foundation of the earth and of heaven. And of course, the column of smoke of Exodus 13:21 and other passages of Exodus, and also in the Psalms and in other passages that are probably from the Yahweh source. So you can see the J here signals that it's a Yahweh source in the documentary hypothesis, and the E is for Elohist. So of course, everyone who is familiar with the documentary hypothesis can kind of see which source is using which term for which context, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I know Fluxo Dynamic has tried to tell me who was using the Amud terminology, but in any case, I forget exactly which author. But you can see there. And I was just kind of getting to the point that the word for the pillar in the burning bush scene, or as I interpret it, of course, that originally the word Seneh meant palm frond midrib, which is a cultic pillar image. And that's like a very specific rare word for a pillar, a very specific type of pillar, so it's in this rare scene of a theophany. And then in the general, when they're just going about the wilderness and elsewhere, God is appearing in an amud of fire, which means pillar. But so you can go different ways with what that means, because it could just mean like, yes, they are from one and the same original concept from the adaptation of a pillar of fire, and they just wanted to use a very specialized term for the very special moment, the special theophany. He's appearing in like a smaller pillar, essentially, although symbolically infinite, but it's like a midrib is like, the core of a palm frond. And okay, and so that's one way you can say, like, they're just different levels of sort of specialization of what this pillar is in different moments. Or you could think that the general pillar that follows them around, that's an amud. Maybe that's from a different author or a different layer, and not even from the Indian adaptation, right? So there's different ways you could look at that. So they could chime together as like an Indian adaptation concept, or there could have been like a pillar of fire that was an amud from a different source, or from a Near Eastern or original, Levantine source that was then had a different word associated with it, and you can see it in the different scenes for that reason, maybe. So I don't really know. You can't really know that for sure, I think. What do you think about that, Josephus?
Yeah, I think we can definitely not know for sure. It's definitely interesting that stampa can also refer to a tree, so maybe there is some sort of analogy. But
Oh,
it could
right.
also be a very generic similarity. It could just be
Yeah.
because obviously pillars or columns in the earliest times were made from trees,
Yeah.
uh, so it could be sort of
Yeah.
a wild goose chase,
I
right?
think I think
Into
it's
this thing.
yes, yeah. I think it's half wild goose chase and half the fact that it's true there's overlap botanically. Like, you're starting with a botanical pillar and you're ending up with the burning bush, which is a botanical bush, a totally different thing. And there could have been it could have made an easier transition because it's like it's one botanical thing to another that has overlap. But I think there's also this huge reason for this having happened was like the coincidence of the word for bush. And so that's just coming down to a coincidence, actually, that's not related to them sharing sharing meaning. It's more like there's this Aramaic word sanya, or it's SN apostrophe. And anyways, this is I want to go in a specific video about how this happened to so I'm not kind of just going off the cuff too much, because I think it's important. But there is this other word for thorn bush that's in Aramaic, and it's like SN apostrophe instead of SNH, right? It's very close. It means thorn bush, but that's it. Actually, its root meaning is actually to hate and not thorn bush. So it means thorn bush figuratively, and secondarily, this word sanya in Aramaic. But because of the closeness of that word to the Hebrew word SNH, Seneh, the meanings got conflated together. The somehow it was decided, or there was confusion, and the SNH Seneh got interpreted as a sanya. Okay, so you can see hopefully the gist of what I'm talking about. I'm really only giving a gist right here, which is it's frustrating to answer this question, not feel like I'm giving a really full answer, but hopefully you can see the point, right? It's a totally different word, this word for thorn bush, and it actually is figured. It has the figurative meaning of thorn bush because it really means the hateful one, or the hated or hateful one. That's what the word sanya actually means, but it was famously used in an Aramaic text called ahikar for a talking thorn bush. And so I think this word caused the tradition around the Hebrew word seneh to get conflated and into the thinking that it was the same word, or meant essentially the same thing. And so there was some confusion. So that's interesting on its own. If that happened, it means there was a break in the chain of kind of understanding what the original word meant. Okay, so that is all to say Stamba might have sort of associations with trees, but it's not really the core driver of why it became interpreted as the burning thorn bush, because the thorn bush meaning was being caused by this other different word that was getting confused with it. Okay, but because pillar words overlap with tree already, it probably made it easier. Because sinu, or because seneh may have meant like a palm branch. That's already botanical, so it makes an easy transition as well, right? You see how there's these two kind of factors coming together, right? Okay. Hopefully I'm making sense as I go off the cuff. What do you think, Josephus? But yeah, you can see right there which one are we looking at here? This is
Yeah, we're looking at the Hebrew Seneh with
yes,
the
Seneh.
H, and then the highlighted portion I highlighted
Yeah, that's
the
the Aramaic word. Yeah.
Aramaic word, which is given by this dictionary as an equivalent. Of course,
It's actually
there's a
not.
whole issue, like it even acknowledges, for instance, that Meissner thinks that Aramaic Seneh with like the Y and the A in the transliteration, or rather the Yod and the Aleph, is a loan word from this. So that this is one opinion, but obviously this doesn't have to be a definitive opinion. So I definitely can see cultural transmission being a bit messy, and the fact that there was already the idea of a column of fire helping maybe the idea of a burning bush as well, so that
Mm-hmm.
there can be, burning brambles. It would be nice to see if there's anything specifically about brambles in Hebrew culture. Like we have references in Roman authors about Roman views of brambles, but like let's
Mm.
see if Hebrew texts have anything to say about that.
Well,
And
yeah, yeah. It's like, what text do you mean? Because you have the Bible, you have the Hebrew Bible, and then like every text you will find um, about brambles is downstream of the burning bush kind of concept being cemented, and
yeah, definitely.
so it's tough.
Maybe other Bible passages that can be ascertained to be early passages. I'm
Mhm.
thinking
Yeah, good
this
point.
kind of terms,
Yeah.
but hoping to find something specifically about brambles with this word or with another word is not too likely. I acknowledge that.
Hmm.
Also, I think I'm going to listen to Sir Frank Lloyd and try
Okay,
to look
let's try
in the
that.
word
Let's try
for
that.
samba without an H. Of
Another.
course, I looked it up with the H,
Mhm.
so it's a post pillar column or stem of a tree,
Mhm.
and also a bunch of other meanings that are obviously derived from metaphorical usages of stamba.
Yeah, and
And then we have the
stem of
version.
a tree is interesting. Stem, like stem of a tree. I wonder, does that mean a branch, a stem of a tree?
The stem
So
probably,
just like
yeah,
four
probably like a branch of a tree,
branch of a
yeah.
tree. Because that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Seneh was like a branch. Anyways, yeah.
Yeah.
Continue with what you were saying.
And so, following the suggestion of our commenter, I'm looking up the version without the H, so with a plain B, stamba, probably a phonetic variation of the same, but here it is glossed as a clump or tuft of grass, or any clump or branch or cluster. Could be maybe like the clusters of, you know, of midribs on a palm leaf. Maybe I'm trying to guess here if there's any
Yeah,
connection to what we're talking
yeah.
about.
Clump of
Of course,
tuft.
it could be
Clump
a bush or a
of
thicket,
bush. I think. Okay,
so
yeah. So
something
that's
relevant
pretty
to.
interesting. No, yeah, that's very interesting. I would just say, like, what is the relationship between, yeah, this one without an H and with an H? Because they are, so it's a phonetic. It's just a phonetic variation, but it still has these secondary meanings. So that's really interesting. Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean,
um,
I
it
find
would
it
just
hard to
lead. It would, yeah,
justify the loss of the H, right? Because
right.
in regular sound changes from Proto-Indo-European to Sanskrit, you would usually expect different Proto-Indo-European consonants to give different Sanskrit consonants. So one with the H and one without the H.
Hmm.
The H is obviously how we talk about it in the Latin alphabet. In Sanskrit, in Devanagari writing system, they have different letters for B, H, and B without the H.
Yeah, I was surprised to
Uh,
see, yeah, without the H, and then it's supposed to be just a variation, but with such a different meaning that you don't usually see. But so it's
yeah, I
kind of
mean,
interesting.
it's possible maybe that they were interdialectal loans. I would probably think about it as a possibility,
Mhm.
maybe from an Iranic variety or a variety that, like Iranic, had lost the distinction between aspirated consonants and
Yeah,
plain voiced consonants. So it
yeah.
could be that.
So I'll add one other thing. So one of the things that I was puzzling over, right, is it's not just a bush, it's not just a thicket, it's specifically a thorn bush. Okay, and so this is what really convinces me that it had to be primarily driven, the kind of change of the meaning to thorn bush had to be primarily driven by confusion with this word Seneh, the Aramaic Seneh, and that because that word is attached to thorn bush rather than just bush. So yes, this sort of thing with Stamba gets you part of the way, but it doesn't explain why it would be a thorn bush specifically. And I think that that's sort of like a red flag to me, or a smoking gun or whatever, that it was really being driven by this Sanya. And the other thing with that is that basically the story of Ahikar is like this extremely famous text of the time, and it is in Aramaic. And we even know that the Elephantine community of Jews of Yahweh worshippers, they had a copy of this book, or they had a copy of the sayings of. Anyways, there's a subsection called this where it's these like little parables, little brief sayings and things like that. And this portion with the talking thorn bush appears in that section. And yeah, we kind of checked in the chat, and Fluxodynamic was able to see that this is one of the texts that they did have at Elephantine. And in this text, there's a talking thorn bush, and its name is Sanya, with this exact word, SN apostrophe. And it is sort of like a wisdom parable of the thorn bush talking to a pomegranate tree. And so what this means is that basically, as far as we can tell, the most famous talking thorn bush in the world at the time period already existing, where this was where this was being composed, most likely, the most famous talking thorn bush in the world was named Sanya, with this word SN apostrophe. And so it leads one to believe that that was a strong influence, and it's kind of it explains why it became a thorn bush rather than just a bush, which if you were just going off of Stamba, meaning bush, you could get kind of to bush, but why a thorn bush, right? So I think it's this Aramaic word influence. Okay, so yeah, what do you think? Is there anything else to say on that? It's tough because there's like, in my head, there's like 20 different steps and details that really show how this happened, and I would like to lay them out very clearly. Whereas when I'm going off the cuff, I ramble and I lose my train of thought. But yeah, anything to add to that?
I mean, I think that the argument is pretty clear, as clear as it can be in a stream.
Yeah.
Like in a live stream form. Obviously, maybe in an article with all the references, it's kind of a slightly different thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would definitely welcome if commenters had other questions. Not
Exactly. I know.
I mean, we're also relating to this. Maybe if they have specific issues with this that they want to iron out, or something that they want to bring up. I mean, definitely.
Yeah, it's always fun. It's fun to go into. And the other interesting thing is, along with this Stamba point, and it might be related, I don't know, but in one of the versions of the Shiva Linga appearing, which I'm saying is one of the the source story being adapted. In one of them, he mentions that the linga can also appear like he lists multiple things, and one of them is a bush. Like the linga appears as a bush in nature. So it's like these amazing little things that you're like, that's kind of a coincidence. It's not really explaining. It's not fully explaining why this happened, but it's there. The bush and tree imagery are right there, ready to be kind of accessed as connected to pillar imagery, right? So it's not a huge surprise that it shifted, because it's right there. Even in the linga version, there's a brief passing mention that the linga can appear as a bush in nature. So it was all meant to be, I guess, and it's very interesting.
Also talking about pillars, I don't know if that has been brought up in the stream, but obviously we have Dionysus Perikionios, so the one who is around the column, I always find it funny, to see this sort of column. Obviously, Dionysus is not maybe the first god that you'd want as the equivalent of Rudra, but I mean, being around the column could make sense maybe as a sort of lunar deity, equivalent of Soma, so a lunar deity orbiting around the axis mundi that could be represented by this column, uh, which in this case would be called Kion in Greek.
Hmm.
So not related to Stamba, sadly, but still conceptually the same thing, conceptually a column.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, Josephus, anyone else have any more questions? If not, then Josephus. Oh wait, here's one. The bush pillar phallus is the axis mundi appearing to his most pious worshipper. So, good question. And in the Shiva Linga stories, the pillar is appearing to Brahma and Vishnu, the gods who are actually in the middle of a fight. However, in that fight, they are both, Brahma is dishonest about, he lies and says that he found the top of the pillar at one point, whereas Vishnu is honest, and so Vishnu is a little bit more of the he is praised by Shiva for his honesty a little bit more, but they're both kind of praised and become pious worshippers of Shiva in the story, right? So they are both, to different degrees, they are his pious worshippers by the end of the story, at least. And then, like I just mentioned, Brahma is the one he's a little bit less honest at first. There's a separate version where it's only Brahma, and the linga only appears to Brahma, so it's a one-on-one more so. So in that story, Brahma is appearing more as like the sole sort of devotee of Shiva within that story frame. So it's a good question. I think originally it was gods that were in this story, and it's been transferred to his most pious worshipper sort of thing. But there's also this layer of the gods being surprised and unprepared for it. So they're not there being pious at the beginning, is what I mean. They're there arguing with each other about, I'm the supreme of the universe versus I'm the supreme. So they're a little bit like they're deluded by Maya to begin the story. That's how the story frames it, at least. And so Vishnu and Brahma are competing and saying, I'm clearly the supreme. And then Shiva appears as the infinite pillar of, or the linga in the infinite pillar of fire. And they can't find the top or bottom of it. And they end up saying Shiva is the supreme and worshiping Shiva. So they become his pious worshippers by the end. So it's not, there's complexity to that question, but you can see what I mean. Every time I read pillar in this context, I think of the spinal column and Kundalini awakening. Well, yes, you should, because the original story of this story, it is the phallus, the linga of fire, and that's where the Kundalini stuff is elaborated from. Is working with the spinal column and the linga. They are kind of, I don't really know. I don't know too technically how they are related, but they're clearly like interrelated pillar images, and the Kundalini is clearly, the Kundalini serpent is clearly interrelated with the linga in tantric practice and material. But I'm not well versed enough on how that exactly works. Which god would Moses / Dadhichi incarnate? So this is, it's hard to say because it's a boiled down version. It's kind of impossible because we have multiple versions where it's Brahma and Vishnu who are having the linga of fire appear to them. And then I've only found like one version where it's just appearing to Brahma. So it's kind of hard to know at, in the 4th or 5th century BC or whatever, what the version was that the Hebrew adapters had in their hands to read from, right? And we don't know. Yeah, because if we were to assume that it was just like they had a copy of the story where it's Brahma and Vishnu arguing with each other, and they translated that into just Moses, then you can't really draw a direct line one to one or the other, because it's kind of like summarizing both of them in just Moses, right? Whereas if they had a version where it's just Brahma, then it's clearly a one-to-one adaptation of Brahma. So it's some of these things you just have to kind of guess, and we can't really know for sure. But yeah, interesting questions. What else? I was gonna say, Josephus, do you have any thoughts on those points before we move on? Before I ask you this next question?
Actually trying to look up if there was anything about that he as an incarnation of any deity. I couldn't find anything, so if he was, it's not explicit.
Basically, yeah, it's basically he seems closest to like an Agni, having the spirit of Agni in him, but even that is kind of questionable. Just like
He definitely has more
Vasishta
of
also.
a role, and that's kind of obvious. But other than that, it's hard to pinpoint.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, and like,
Obviously, Agni is one of the deities who is related to the priesthood in Vedic material, so it could make sense.
yeah,
Also, I mean, the bones of that heat tree become the Vajra, so become the thunder, and thunder is understood to be the atmospheric fire. So maybe there's also another Agni connection, but then Vajra is connected to
good point.
Indra, to Shiva, to a number of other deities. So it's hard to pinpoint which of those deities could be
Yeah,
the one that heat tree depends from
yeah,
as
yeah,
an inclination or whatever else.
yeah. Another thing, so like Vasishta, he is more frequently like connected to Agni as an incarnation, but some of these things are like inconsistent how they're identified as incarnations. Sometimes some of these sages. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah,
And
the sages are also probably beyond the incarnation of a specific god.
right,
If they are dedicated to contemplation, presumably they have reached the understanding of unity that goes beyond
yeah,
the beyond any intellectual distinction, any rational distinction that we could make. Um,
yeah,
so that would kind of defeat the point of being a specific god's incarnation as opposed to the
yeah.
incarnation of one and all, right?
Yes, yes. Unless the only possibility is unless they were intentionally originally modeled after a deity, and then that kind of got a little lost or muddled. That's always possible too. But one interesting thing is, yeah. So Kahal from the Patreon, he brought forward some parallels. This I'm just remembering this off the top of my head, so unfortunately I'm not going to have all the details. But he did bring up some points where it seemed that like Nechten had the Irish Nechten had some similar stories to Dadhichi, I think is what he was saying, or maybe it was to Vasishta actually. So maybe I'm actually messing that up. So I apologize. But yeah, Mr. Garvey, and yeah, it was very interesting. It's one of those like very complicated things that's hard to get to the bottom of, but it was definitely good food for thought. It made me think like, what if there was like an Apam Napat mythos that was expressing itself through either Vasishta or Dadhichi. So sort of like another just unknown that I can't really speak on, but it is also interesting that Apam Napat has lightning connection. So I wonder if there's any like lost Apam Napat myths they could have worked their way into here, but again, that would only be speculation. But yeah, so originally I was just going to ask you, Josephus, if you had a particular preference of going into, like, I had this Song of the Sea and Rig Veda, the 2 lines, and I was just gonna, because that's the material I have been thinking about this week. I was just gonna go through like the linguistic connections that are interesting in how one line was translated to the other from Sanskrit to Hebrew. So I didn't know if that would be of any interest to you, or if that would be kind of like too messy or something, or uninteresting to you, or if we wanted to go into like just talking about the Yama parallel and seeing what we could discuss on that. Do you have a preference?
I mean, I'm all for going into the Sanskrit and Hebrew comparison. We could do that definitely. Maybe the Yama comparisons could take another live stream.
Yeah, that's true.
We already named this one after the comparison of the Song of the Sea.
Well, it's all provisional. Everything's provisional, so it can all be changed. But
yeah, but, I mean, we can definitely have a look.
Okay, let's have a look.
Remind me which Rig Veda hymn was it, so I can actually go.
Yeah, 7.18 or 7, book 7, hymn 18, and it's verse 5. So it's one of the nice things is it's just one like line in a verse that we're looking at, just a few words, but it kind of is a Pandora's box of meaning. So
okay,
what
which,
sorry,
which mandala?
7, and then
18.
hymn 18, verse 5.
Okay, perfect. Here we are. Why doesn't it take 18? Okay, here we are. Okay, so here we have the Sanskrit text. We can definitely have a look not only at that, but also specifically at the morphological glossing. So we
Perfect. That's great. That's great.
Okay. So here we have Arnamsi. Okay, it's from Arnyas. Let's look what it means word by word. That's gonna take a little. Okay, so okay, this word means waves.
I think it's translated as floods by Jameson Bird. That was one of the other.
Yeah, let me actually toggle all the content that is not useful to our reading. So let's just keep the only available English translation and the Sanskrit text. Okay, so what the floods? Okay, here is the flood, but it could be, according to the dictionary, the wave or the stream. Of course, flood is more more fitting. Maybe if we're talking about something grandiose, excessive compared to a simple wave. Spreads widely. Indra made them shallow and easy for Sudas to traverse. He, worthy of our praises, caused the sinew fell over him to curse the river's fury. Okay, now let's look into this Suda. What is the Suda? Let's see.
Well, Sudas is he's the king. He's just the king. Yeah, sorry. He's the name. That's the name.
Okay, a name of celebrated king of the Tritsus, son of Divodasa. Okay.
So he is the protagonist. He's the good guy in the hymn. Vasishta is his purohita in this particular hymn, and so Vasishta is praising Indra with his hymn, and Indra is causing the waters of the river to become this word Gadhani. And so this Gadhani is one of the key words that we're going to look at. It's translated as shallow or fords, things like this, but it is this sort of pivot word that has some deeper meanings that we'll look at here. Okay,
so okay, I'm looking at the dictionary entry. Of course, dictionary entries don't necessarily have to be fulfilling, but clearly it's a shallow, fordable, so something that can be traversed on foot or on horseback, as we would imagine that people in Suda's time would do. And so that's definitely the kind of situation that textual critics usually envision for the Exodus situation. Of course, in the book of Exodus, there is the idea of the waters being divided. I'm not sure how much of this
This is a
is
key.
tradition and how much of
Yes.
this is, from the actual text. So we might actually
Right.
have to just
So
go
okay,
back.
so this is a key. This is what you brought up is a key point, and I'll go into this. So in the Song of the Sea itself, it is more or less not being these words have ambiguity, so it can be read into it, right? But it is very not clear that that is exactly what's happening. The waters simply being parted left and right. In Exodus 14, the prose lead up to the song, it's more described that a wind came in and blew the water, this way or whatever. So we could look at Exodus 14 to see the exact wording there more so. But in Exodus 15, verse 8 is what we were looking at, and it says essentially the waters piled up, the yeah, the waters stood up in a heap, and then the deep waters congealed in the heart of the sea. So there's these three descriptions of what the waters are doing. None of those specifically say the waters parted and there was dry land in the middle, right? That is there are traditions in like the Hebrew tradition which make that more clear, but they seem to be, possibly later texts, most likely later texts, right? And scholars have commented on this. Okay, so I don't have all the scholarly references memorized, but they're the dividing, the very like picturesque Hollywood picture of the waters dividing into two walls left and right is not there in Exodus 15:8, as you'll see right here. It can be kind of vaguely read into it if you want that to be what those words are saying, right? Because it's a figurative language, but it's not explicit that that's what's happening. And I will argue that that is more or less not the gist, although it could be like a secondary thing that's also happening. It's not the primary. It's not the primary thing that's happening with the sort of congealing of the waters, at least. Okay, so yeah, okay, so you can see here the floods. Here's our sort of anchor point is this first word, nozalim, because it means the floods also, just like arnamshi, right? We saw arnamshi means floods or waves. Nozalim is the floods or like descending waters, I think, or something. Um,
Yeah, the waves or the streams, but in this case, maybe flood is a translation. Let me actually look up the Hebrew
yeah,
non-salim.
sounds
Maybe
good.
it has. Okay, it seems to have not many
Flowing waters,
occurrences, but
but it's
it
about
can mean
flowing and moving
flood,
waters, essentially.
flood. Okay.
Well, okay, but still,
Okay, as a verb, obviously, the verb root means to gush out, to melt, to run a stream. So once again, we have another meaning that is shared with the Sanskrit word. And the definition to flow, to trickle, to distill. So the idea is obviously water running down in some way or another.
yeah.
That's definitely the image. And also the word ned, if we've seen, as we've seen earlier, I can actually
Mm-hmm.
take the Strong's Hebrew back, but it's always a word associated with water. So it's not necessarily something um, unusual that can happen with water. It's more or less a congealment of water, water kind of heaping up or forming a sort of specific wave pattern. Probably the original authors and readers had it clearly in mind
Well,
more than we do. But most textual critics usually envision something like the waters being fordable, being traversable, but not necessarily being split in the
yes,
theatrical way that we're
yeah.
used to seeing in like artworks and then later on even in cinema and elsewhere.
Yeah, so this is kind of what I want to paint here, and it is there are some meanings that scholars connect it to where this word ned, right, can refer to how a wave is like a heap, is acting like a heap or something. But actually, there are a lot more sort of associated words that some scholars point to, suggesting that, words that are related to this word, or the closest relatives of this word, mean things like, a heap of produce, and also a mound of earth, and things that are more solid that you wouldn't necessarily expect in water. So it can mean like a water heap, but it also can point more to this solidification. So I'm actually gonna let me pull up my document here. Okay, just a sec.
I mean, in the meantime that you pull your documents up, I was kind of thinking the fact that Indra is the one who makes the waters fordable plays into the characterization of Indra as a god who has control over water. I think that Nick Allen also talks about it in the comparison between the Iliad and the Mahabharata, and specifically compares Indra's action in a forest. There's a whole battle in which Arjuna and Krishna side with Agni and the fire gods versus Indra, who has control over the rains, over that forest. So Indra definitely has a closer relationship with water than maybe other thunder deities. But obviously,
Mm.
there's obviously the idea that a deity of the atmosphere can have some degree of control over water as well. Obviously, precipitation, rains,
Right.
winds can influence water, of course. And so that's really interesting because Yahweh is clearly drawing from the material of thunder deities of the Near East, maybe Baal, which is sort of the pan-Semitic thunder deity, Baal Haddad specifically as a thunder deity, but we have Belum among the Akkadian-speaking peoples, and clearly, it seems that among the various attributes of this thunder deity, Yahweh has also borrowed the attribute of controlling, possibly via the winds or via some other atmospheric phenomenon, the condition of water and making it fordable for people to pass through. That's definitely
Right.
something interesting that plays into our understanding of Yahweh as a thunder god, if
Right. Right.
possible.
What is interesting in the Rig Veda is that Indra simply is like the god of fording rivers. So for whatever reason, he creates, he makes rivers. There are other hymns in the Rig Veda about fording and crossing rivers, and Indra is the primary god who makes that possible. So that's interesting to begin with. But he also is the god who, in a couple other places, and I'll pull up the citation here in a second, but he is the one who finds these Gadham. So it's this word Gadhani, right? Which means firm places to stand in water. So as a shorthand, they'll say it means fords, a ford, right? But it means specifically firm places to stand in water, and it is treated as a synonym for stha or pratishta, meaning like this word meaning a foundation, and it is used in cosmogonic myths about the first foundation in the watery deeps, the pratishta. That was this first place to stand in the abyssal waters, right? And that first place to stand, that pratishta that is found in the creation myths, is really the primordial mound, right, of Earth. And that primordial mound is also the cosmic egg. It's all one thing that's emerging out of the waters, and it is called the pratishta. But in any case, we have. I will scroll. Let me scroll down to this. Here is Indra. So Gadhani is primarily a synonym for pratishta, and offering firm standing ground, fordable in waters is what Gadha can mean. So Indra repeatedly finds the Gadham in the Gambhira, and the Gambhira is the deeps. Okay, so Rigveda 6.24.8, even in the deep Gambhira, there is a ford, Gadham, for him, Indra. So Indra is finding the Gadham in the Gambhira. And then, like the two lofty world halves, you will find firm standing, pratishtham, that's that word, in the depths, as his feet do for a man crossing a Gadham. And so that shows how pratishta and Gadham are these paired kind of contrasting sort of synonyms. They mean essentially the same thing in different contexts. And then Rigveda 5.47, might we obtain a fording place and firm standing, pratishtham, a fording place and firm standing. These are these terms paired together, right? Okay, and it's also used Indra finding a Gadham in the wide places as well as the depths. Okay, so it is a topic in the Rig Veda, right? It is an established trope and an established mythos in the Rig Veda that Indra finds the Gadham, the firm places to stand, in the deep waters as well as the wide waters. And this word Gadham, it's a synonym for pratishta, paired with it often. Pratishta meaning a foundation, or foothold. And pratishta is the word, it's like the magic word for the cosmogonic foundation in the primordial depths of waters, which is the primordial mound or cosmic egg. Okay, so you can see how there's this web of associations in the Veda where Gadham is is like an echo of the primordial pratishta in the depths, right? And so Indra finding the Gadham in the deeps in these hymns that I have here, that already is like an echo of the pratishta that was found in the deeps in the first moment of the creation, right? And I think the reason he finds the Gadham in the deeps, it could connect to one of his like cosmogonic roles where he is treated as the one who separates sky and earth in some contexts and holds them apart and creates like firm foundation as the the like I think in Mandala 10 where Indra is treated as doing something like that, where he's like holding the atmosphere apart and creating like a stability in there, right? He does something like that, if you can recall. I'm not sure, but I don't have that hymn specifically at hand. But do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I have it in mind. Obviously, the atmosphere is the space where humans can live and breathe and exist. So definitely, I don't know what the word is used. I actually I'd have to look up the references. Maybe Um, let's see if I can find any textual reference and look at the terms used there. Uh, was it the same hymn that also had the word to cut? So the root kr with the syllabic r, right? Maybe it's the same hymn. Maybe it's another. I would.
Good question. I'm not sure. Let's see. I might be able to find it too.
Okay, let's see.
We'll race to find it.
Okay, maybe I think I have it in. Maybe it's not the only one that talks about this, but we have in Mandala 10, hymn 104, a reference to Indra. This was actually in reference to the killing of Vritra as well. So heroic power and noble praise is Indra. The song worships him, invoked of many. He quelled Vritra, so he killed, obviously, well, more than killed. The verb here is akrnot, so
exactly.
he sort of created.
Yes.
So, obviously,
this is great. This is great because akrnot is the word in the verse that we were looking at as well. The one he makes. So in Rig Veda 7.18, he makes the floods, Arnamshi, he makes them into Gadani. And the word for making into is Akarnat in that verse as well. So it aligns
So
with
here
this.
we have
Yeah.
this relevant keyword here, and then we have ulokam. So basically, the room, implied obviously the room for men to exist, to live. I actually would like to see the definition. I don't know if it's related to loka, meaning place, or it's just, yeah, here it is explained as a collateral form of loka. Loka, obviously, for context, means intermediate space
Mm-hmm.
or room, and obviously the idea to make room, kr, loka, means to also grant freedom, as in giving the space to have freedom. And then it can also mean a world, the universe, or any division of the universe, so kind of like Latin mundus or Greek cosmos. We can see that kind of usage, and also especially the earth or world of human beings. So obviously the implication in this Rigvedic passage is that Indra created the space for humans to exist,
Mm-hmm.
to breathe and all that other stuff. Obviously,
Right.
I'm thinking of breathing with Indra as an atmospheric god.
Yeah.
So, of course, that could be one of the relevant implications of the passage. Let's
Right.
see if we, okay, Akrnot is the same word that we find here in the passage of Mandala 7 that we were talking about.
Yeah.
So, and we also find it here,
Yes.
Gadhani Aknot. So everything checks out pretty neatly. Um, I guess that Gadhani and Uloka and other variations, they're probably pointing to the same idea, even if obviously we can just ignore that they're different words and maybe they have different connotations. But the idea of Indra creating a space to either generically exist, as in the case of Uloka, or in this specific case, the space to walk on and to traverse, afford to
Mm-hmm.
go from one end to the other, is definitely interesting. And obviously, in this specific case, it plays better with Yahweh. And even creating the space for humans to exist does arguably play well with Yahweh of Genesis. So
Right.
that's another thing that was uh, maybe also related, inspired, or refined after contact with other populations in their midst.
Right. Right. So so yeah, I think we have this word Gadhani, and the interesting thing is, so it is not just that firm places or fords are being made in the water. The let's see, I think it's the okay, so the waters, the floods, the Arnamshi, are being made into the Gadhani in this line. So I will, let me just remove that, and then I'm gonna get another document here. Okay, so this is my Jameson and Brereton of the verse, right? So at the top is verse 5 that we're looking at. Even the floods that had spread out, Indra made them into Gadhani. So one of the things I want to get across is that the English translations obscure the sort of underlying Sanskrit words, and the Sanskrit words can have more mystical, mythological baggage and meaning to them in themselves. And the authors, the poets, may have been intending these sort of mythical associations with the words and with exactly how they're making their sentences, okay? And that can get lost in translation to English or into other languages, right? So as we just looked at, this actually says the Arnam-Shi were Akarnot made into Gadhani. So, and we had the exact, Sanskrit there a minute ago. It's something like that. And that comes through a bit in Jameson and Brereton. They preserve the fact that the floods are being made into fords, but the word fords kind of loses the mythical underpinning of the word Gadhani, which is, it's this special thing that Indra finds in the deeps or the wides of water. And it can mean a pratishta. It's like this foundation, and it can kind of be echoing the primordial mound. Now, I think that's crucial because it's not just saying fords were made in the waters or something like that. It's saying the waters are being made into the Gadhani. And this Gadhani, it's not just fords, right? It's like a firm place to stand in the water, referencing back to the pratishta. So I think it's all an intentional reference back to the primordial egg and primordial mound foundation knowingly by the poet, because if you look down at verse 8, when the waters are made to rush back over the enemies, what they do is they divert the river. They cause something to break that it was holding back the waters, right? Making the dry ground. And their action of doing that is described as causing Aditi to abort or miscarry. The word is, the word means like miscarry, but if you cause someone to miscarry, you are causing them to abort, essentially. So what that means is that if the breaking out of the waters that had been pent up and the firm place, the solidified the solidified waters that had been made into firm places, right? If those breaking out is a metaphysical abortion, a divine abortion, it's like Aditi is like the boundless container of order. So when she aborts, it's like chaos. Or it's like, she's holding in the solidified Gadhani, it seems like, as you can see there's like this continual metaphor between verse 5 and verse 8, where when the abortion happens, it's the waters breaking out of the having been dried up, firmed up. That means that verse 5, if it refers back to when those were made, that implies that verse 5 was implicitly a conception of Aditi. Okay, is what I would argue. This is possible because the listener and the poet themselves, using terms like the Gadhani, which refers back to the Pratishta, it's sort of within the Vedic intertextual tradition, right? Among the hymns, they would kind of understand that this is repeating the conception of the cosmic egg when the waters first became solid ground in the very first moment of the creation. So that so that's why it's possible for in verse 8, when the waters burst out, that's why it's possible to refer that as the abortion of Aditi, I would say. Otherwise, the abortion of Aditi in verse 8 comes out of nowhere and it doesn't refer back to anything. It's hard to interpret, which is why scholars, for the most part, don't really understand why Aditi is being caused to abort there. So I think it's because they don't understand. They haven't put these two lines together to see that Gadhani is knowingly referring back to the original pratistha, which is a conception. So that when it bursts out in verse 8, clearly those are tied together, right? If the waters bursting out is an abortion, then the waters drying up and firming up is a conception, right? Okay, so I think that's personally, I think that's obvious once you put that together, although it's very obscure at the same time. When you first read it, it is layers of mythical illusion that are happening under, between the lines. But it also is sort of the only logical way to make sense of the connection between these two motifs, I think. So what's interesting about that is that we have if we go back to the Hebrew line, do you have it open still, Josephus?
Yeah, do you need line 8, right? I
Yeah,
have it open. Okay. Line 8 is here. The verb is zriv, meaning to miscarry. It can also mean generically to fail or to turn out badly. So in that
yeah,
case,
yeah.
it's not necessarily a miscarriage or abortion, but definitely I can see the idea of conception. I mean, it's Indra. Indra is obviously
Well, also because
very
it's
friendly, very, always seducing women, goddesses, names. So I can definitely see the implication that Indra somehow conceived something. It's interesting though that he conceived it to miscarry it, right?
yes, yes,
Specifically for it not to be born. It's really
yeah.
interesting. I don't
Aditi,
know what the implications.
yeah,
Universe.
Aditi is the goddess who is the mother of the Adityas, and they're like the gods of solar order. Um, but her son Martanda is a miscarried son. So she famously has one son who is miscarried, and that Martanda then like develops into the son itself afterwards, as far as I understand it. So there's a process by which that aborted lump is then taken and turned into the son. So she's famously a goddess who has a divine abortion or miscarriage rather. Um, so I think that could be in the back here. But oh hi, how's it going? Yeah, good to see you. And so the there is a lot of scholarship on this word meaning probably miscarriage or abortion because Aditi is known to abort. Also, if you consider it as just to fail, it's caused Aditi to fail. In what sense? It's kind of vague. She's known as a mother goddess, so it all kind of um, is pretty clear what it means. And so yeah, she's known to abort, so it's probably referring elusively to that. Uh, but yeah, you're right that it's fascinating that it is she conceives in order to abort, but it's all intentional by the male god who is kind of causing it to happen. It seems like, or rather, okay. So what happens in the Vedic one is the enemies by their folly cause this to happen. So the protagonists walk across on the firm ground that has been created, but and so they kind of they get the good side of the conception of the firming together, the floods being made into firm places, and which is the conception, as I'm saying. And so there's enough there for them to make it to safety, but then because of the folly of the enemies, they get the bad side of it. So it's kind of like there are if you they did it to themselves, if you interrupt this cosmic act happening, you get crushed. Whereas yeah, it's a good question, like why that exactly happens, but we could get into that more at the end perhaps as well, like why that exactly happens.
Okay, there's one thing that actually came to my mind, which is Ashvataman uh, using some sort of supernatural weapon to abort. I don't remember whether was it the grandson of Arjuna? Anyway, the next in line of succession for the Pandava throne. It's
Well,
interesting.
I think it's not when he kills all of Arjuna's children.
I mean, he does that as well,
A
but I
different a
think he
different
also
part.
uses. There's also another episode. Let me see. Let me look it up. Hoping I'm not
Okay.
doing
Yeah.
it
And
on.
in the meantime, I'll say that I think the reason that this happens is that it's sort of like a magical ritual that the in terms of why well, okay, this may have just been a actual historical event that happened, which was then interpreted in these frameworks. Therefore, logically, if the waters turning into firm places to stand, if that is conception, metaphysically speaking, then when those enemies caused it to break apart, and that was an abortion of the goddess, that's just what happened. And so, wow, like don't mess with the divine conception, or you're gonna get washed away in the miscarriage of the waters. But on the other hand, it could be framed as a like intentional ritual magical kind of framing where when the poet writes this into a hymn, it is magically invoking this division of you know in the same kind of logic that a lot of rituals and a lot of magic work by this sort of almost scapegoat. Like that's the closest, that's the easiest analogy for people to think about, at least, where like the negative energy is taken by one side, the positive by the chosen side, the ritualist. When you frame this into a hymn, it's like the protagonists gain the magical, divine, positive influence from their closeness, from their being there metaphysically on the primordial mound that's being formed, whereas then ritually the opponents are being cast down, being cast aside. And so it could be sort of like an intentional ritual to sort of separate off the enemies and send them to the abyss, so to speak. Whereas your side gets the positive influence. So it could be kind of like a combination of those things. I think like they saw this happen, and framing it into mythical frameworks, it just logically makes sense that the good side walked across on the primordial mound, and the bad side must have been caught in a divine miscarriage that they caused upon themselves. But also framing it that way, it imprints this sort of magical structure, which can be re-invoked, I think, in a sort of in the way that hymns magically work. So, what do you think, Jesse? Do you have anything?
So yeah, I think that obviously this ritual understanding of the hymn is crucial. Obviously, hymns do not exist in a vacuum ever, so there's always, or almost always, some Celtic practice that is related to them. And also have two thoughts on the matter. So the first one is what I was saying earlier. So I looked up the details. So Ashwatthama specifically used the Brahmastra, so the Brahma weapon, against Uttara, who was the wife, by then probably already widow, of Abhimanyu, the son of Arjuna. So Uttara was carrying the heir apparent to the Pandava throne, and so obviously Ashwatthama had every interest to have her miscarry. Thankfully, by Krishna's intervention, she does not miscarry. She and her child are saved. The child is eventually born and named Parikshit, who is possibly a historical king. It's heavily debated, but he might have been a historical king. And he's also the one to which the most part of the Mahabharata is narrated to. He's the intended audience, quote unquote, for the poem. The other thought I have about the separation of the goodies and the baddies, of we who get the good side effect and the enemies who get the evil side effect, um, makes me think of the myth of Trita Aptya. In this myth, the issue is how to wash away the stain, the ritual impurity derived from killing a Brahmin. Um, since Aptya kills, I think it was Trishiras, the three-headed monster. Anyway, this ritual impurity is passed down to a number of people who are perceived as being not fitting with the Vedic ethics. So people who have committed some sort of ritual impurity, taboo breaking, um, and in this way, the effects of the Brahmahatya, so the killing of the Brahmin, ends up benefiting Tritaaptya and the other people in his community. So in this case, also the gods, Indra and all that portion of the gods. Whereas the evil side effects of the action fall on perceived enemies or perceived traitors. And so this might be something not too far away from what we see in this hymn. In this hymn, obviously, we have no deities. Well, deities are involved in other ways, right? But they are not the beneficiaries of the action. In this case, humans are the beneficiaries of the god's action, and other humans who are enemies of the aforementioned humans end up being the victims of the unwanted side effects of the action. So in this case, Sudas and his people get to cross the river, and the other people get the miscarriage of Aditi, get completely submerged by the waters.
Right. Yeah, that's a good example of how this kind of logic, it does operate in Vedic material. And you can find other cases of that, I'm sure. But yeah, it's definitely part of these things that you have to keep in mind, that there is this sort of transference of divine energy. It's being redirected by the sages. They are magical ritualists, so and they are using mythical frameworks to make that happen, to make that work. And so that's why it's important, I think, for them to invoke, this is Aditi's abortion, and this is referring back to the firm places being made from the waters as the original conception within that hymn. Then the whole thing is taking place in mythical space, in divine space, where that kind of magical potency can be manipulated and has its full effect, So okay, all right. So I guess like the main thing that is crucial to me is that you can see here in the Vedic line, the Arnamshi are being made into Gadhani. And this word Gadhani, it's more complex than fords. It really means firm places to stand in water. So water is being made into firm places to stand in water. And that's referring back intertextually to the Pratishta, which is the primordial mound. It's all there, which you will not see if you don't know the tradition, but the Vedic poet would have known it intimately, and the hearers would have mostly known it, probably, ideally. And then the fact that line 8, the abortion, must be referring back to the Gadhani being formed as this conception. So that's fascinating, because if that's true, if what I just said is true, that's the same framework underlying the line in Exodus 15, verse 8, which is that the Nozelim and also the Tehomot, the deep waters, they are being made into made into the heap, the Ned, right? And also the deeps themselves are congealing in the heart of the sea. So it is like the same sort of, if you just read the line, you'll miss the fact of what is being described, I think. Because as far as what I'm arguing is, the waters themselves are being solidified. It's not our usual, you have to get past like the Hollywood picture of the waters merely parting to reveal the dry land that's already there. What you can see in the Rig Veda line, it is not that clear. It seems to be pointing back to a mythic moment where waters themselves are solidified into the Gadham in the deep, or the Pratishta in the deep. And the same thing seems to be implied in the in the words chosen in the Hebrew line for the waters themselves are made into a heap, or the waters themselves are congealed, which is a solidification image. So this is something that keeps scholars continually comment on as well. So this is not just me saying this, but if you read commentaries, Bible scholars will continually kind of wrestle with the fact that it sounds like the waters are being described themselves as solidifying. So a lot of scholars will try to rationalize this as the waters freezing, because that is how we usually think of waters congealing or solidifying, as turning to ice. So that's kind of like a fallback that scholars use. But I think this is a mistake when you understand the Vedic model that it's adapting from. And the Vedic model is actually about waters that turn into solid land. So the waters themselves are turning into solid land, and that solid landification of the waters is pointing back to a moment of conception. Even in the Rig Veda hymn, it's implied that it's a conception. So this is fascinating because the word in the line, the deep waters congealed in the heart of the sea, in Exodus 15, verse 8, right? It says the deep waters congealed in the heart of the sea. This word for congealed, so let's look at this word for congealed. I'm not going to be able to pronounce it, so I apologize, but it's like kafa. It's like kafa or kafa'u or something like that. So, or kapa'u. It's one of those. And yeah, it's that. So scholars note that this is used in like 3 places in the Bible, other than this one. And one of them is by far the most prominent and the most clear of what's happening, and that is Job 10:10. So if you go to Job 10:10, you can read it, and it says, it's Job, talking to God. Did you not? Let's see. Well, they've scrambled the order around in terms of English, but so it's hard to read that. But in any case, it says, "Did you not curdle me? Did you not pour me out like milk? Did you not kafa?" Whatever the form of that word is.
Yeah, here it
So
would be
yeah,
takfe'eni, takfe'eni.
yeah,
Of course, it's a form of the same
a
verb.
form of the same verb. Yeah,
The base form would be kafa, and the Exodus version would be kafeu, but it's still
yeah,
this all forms of the same verb, basically. Yeah.
yeah.
And here
Perfect.
it's clearly to curdle. There's not many options here. Like
Yeah. There's no
usually.
options. It means curdle or congeal. They've clearly translated as curdle, which is perfectly great and fine. But if you look at actually 9 through, if you look, this is just Job 10:10. If you look at Job 9 through 11, it says basically it's a process of conception and then getting flesh and bones from God. And the curdling is like the solidification or the forming of the embryo moment in this in these 3 lines. Okay, so remember, I pray that, let's see, you've made me like clay. You've made me like clay. You've poured me out like milk. So this is like what pouring. This is either pouring of the soul like milk or pouring of the seed of like milk. Whatever
Maybe
the
of the
moment
blood,
is. Where
I would dare to
what was that?
say.
What was that?
Maybe even of blood, like
Maybe even of blood.
filling
Yeah,
the body with blood.
yeah.
Certainly, in the Alexandrian period, milk was understood to be some sort of filtered blood, which is
Okay.
the modern scientific understanding as
Yeah.
well. This was attributed to ancient Egyptian priests. I don't know how ancient and whether that can be verified in Egyptian sources, but still, it could be that milk is a symbolic of blood,
Right.
regardless of scientific considerations. And yeah, I mean, it's clearly a process of creation. The idea is
Yeah.
obviously that Yahweh is responsible for creating Job, right?
Right. So the very moment that this word, the form of the word kafa is used, it is the congealing together right before he gets flesh and bones. Okay, because the next verse, verse 11, he gets flesh and bones. So it is like he's being poured out like something liquid. That liquid is curdling together. So it's just when the liquid form of himself as an embryo, so to speak, when he's first being made, he's congealing together from liquid into something solid, and then he gets bones and sinews and is knit together, right? So it's very clear that this word, the most prominent parallel for this word is a image of conception where the embryo itself is in a moment of congealing. And this is fascinating because that's what the waters are doing. So it's a well-known image. It's a well-known word for when liquid itself turns into something solid. Okay. Not only that, it's a well-known word tied to this Job verse about divine influence conception of an embryo. Okay. So hopefully you see what we're circling when I point that out. And I'm gonna just pull up a scholar here, so it's not just me talking about this. Move that. Okay. So when the Hebrew poet says the deep waters congealed in the heart of the sea, and specifically uses this word kafa'u, a word primarily found in Job 10:10 to describe the curdling or congealing together of the embryo or pre-embryo as it solidifies during conception. This cannot be an accident, right? So when the dike is broken in the Vedic one, it is also all about the miscarriage of a conception that has been made earlier. Okay, so where's my scholar? So this is why kafa'u is used in Exodus 15:8. It is a mixing / curdling image, but one that's specifically used for conception and congealing of an embryo. Specifically when liquid is being made solid by a divine hand. So William H.C. Prop has a great commentary on this. It's great because it aligns with what I'm saying already, so that's why it's great. But anyways, so he says, this word means congealed. And despite critiques by Albright and Cross and Friedman and Wolters, this traditional interpretation as meaning congealed is probably correct. So see Cluse. After all, it is presupposed in Exodus 14. And part of the problem is the rarity of this word, found in biblical Hebrew only in these 3 places, and then also one other. But QP apostrophe is more common in Rabbinic Hebrew and Aramaic, where it denotes the formation of solids in liquids. The liquid may predominate as when solids rise to the surface as scum or ice, hence the extended connotations float, rise. Alternatively, the solids may predominate as in the curdling of cheese. The common denominator is coagulation. Returning to the biblical attestations, we find that despite some ambiguities, the translation congeal, solidify fits all occurrences. Zephaniah 1:12 describes complacent drunkards as, using this word, coagulated together with their lees, meaning as thick and slow as goblet sledge. So they've become slow and congealed. As for Zechariah 14:6, while the context is obscure, we may read with the Greek thus and frigidity and rigidity. And it can be associated with cold and freezing, of course. Okay, in Exodus 15:8, congeal fits well. And cheese setting also. Okay, so the poet has been developing a progressively paradoxical and miraculous image. The waters are first piled up, nermu, not unusual in a storm, but then they actually stand upright, nisabu. How? Because some of the waters, the deeps, have congealed, presumably into ice, he says. To heighten the miracle, the ice does not float to the surface, but remains vertical in sea's heart. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I believe not having the Vedic model in hand causes scholars to want to rationalize the congealing when it's actually a miracle, which is established in the Vedic model, and that miracle is that the waters are turning to earth, to land rather than ice. Okay, so I think that you'll see scholars try to fall back on freezing as a rationalization, but it's not really what the myth is about. It's not what the creation myth is about per se. But then what's amazing is that Prop, in his speculations, puts his finger on the Vedic mythic parallel as well. So it's not just me that's saying this. You can see that William H.C. Prop also connects this to the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which is kind of like the most clear example of this. So we shall see that the sea event symbolically recapitulates creation. The congealing of the deep may be an overlooked part of the picture. After all, Zechariah 14:6, though scarcely intelligible, uses this word in the context of cosmogony. Congealing might be pertinent to creation in one of two ways. According to Genesis 1:9, the primordial waters simply withdrew to reveal the dry ground. So, point being, in the actual Genesis creation, the waters are just revealing dry ground. They are not congealing a world egg. That is not what the Hebrew Bible creation myth is about. That's what the Vedic creation myth is about, though. Okay, so he continues, but where did the land come from? Perhaps another version described the solidification of some of the sea. So maybe he's saying maybe there was another creation myth they were drawing from in this line. Just as in the Babylonian Enuma Elish, Tiamat's, that is equivalent of Hebrew Tahom, deep, Tiamat's lower half becomes the solid earth. And so to be clear, in that myth, Tiamat is just cut in half, and so it is true. The waters directly become the hard earth, and that is a key reference. But it's also interesting, the waters do not congeal into the earth in the Tiamat story either. That is the Tiamat story is like a missing link there. It's a correct reference in terms of it's the correct parallel, because it is the deep waters turning directly into land in the dividing of in the equivalent of like an earth egg dividing moment. But the problem is the waters themselves are not being shown to congeal into solid ground. That is what is found repeatedly in the Vedic sources. And so because of that, he goes on. In some Egyptian cosmogonies, the primeval ocean coagulates to form the first hillock. So it's also in Egyptian. And so that is also crucial. It's not in the Hebrew or even exactly the same in the Tiamat story, but it's in Egyptian and Vedic ones. So like they kind of like support each other, that he is getting close to the target here. It's there in Egyptian. The waters themselves coagulate to form the first hillock of the world, of land. And a similar concept existed in India. Foam above the primordial waters congealed to form the dry land in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 1.2.2, a process one text compares to the curdling of cheese. And so that's exactly what Job 10:10 is compared to, the curdling of cheese. So when we think of congealed water, however, we ordinarily envision ice or possibly glass. So then he goes back, he falls back into rationalizing it as ice, which again, it's because he doesn't realize it's being copied from this concept that is embedded in the Rig Veda hymn line. And that Rig Veda hymn line that we looked at, it has that myth as the subtext of that line, and it is pointing back to Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So let's see if I have Brihadaranyaka Upanishad here. Okay. I've got to. Okay, so this is the citation from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. It is crucial to see how this curdling idea is shared between the cosmic egg myth and the congealing of the waters in Exodus 15. So, quote, water is arca, and the word arca refers to like the like luminous brightness of something, I guess. So water is arca. What was there like froth on the water was solidified and became this earth. Solidified then has a special verb for solidification of the water directly into earth, samhanyata. And in the Shankara Acharya's commentary attached to this verse says, what was there like froth on the water? Like the coagulated state of curds, was solidified, being subjected to heat internally and externally. Or the word sara or shara may be the nominative instead of a complement. If we change the gender of the pronoun yad, that solid thing became this earth. That is to say, out of the water came the embryonic state of the universe compared to an egg, unquote. Okay, and so this is also found in multiple other places like the Shatapatha Brahmana, the basic concept. 6.1.1, he desired, that is Prajapati, the creator god, desired, may I generate this earth from these waters. He compressed it and threw it into the water. He toiled and practiced austerity, tapas, heat. Worn out with toil and austerity, he created foam, and then also sand, mud, pebbles, etc. And then he says, this earth has indeed become bu, a foundation, pratishta, unquote. So we have it right there, that the foundation that first appears is called the pratishta. He's creating it from the foam and the waters. May I generate this earth from these waters, right? And then in 1.3.2 through 3 and 7, instead of compressing the material or the waters, it is beaten. It says, the water said, what is to become of us? Ye shall be heated, he said. They were heated. They created foam. Hence, foam is produced in heated water. The foam said, what is to become of me? Thou shalt be heated, he said. It was heated and produced clay. For indeed the foam is heated. When it floats on the water covering it, and when one beats upon it, it indeed becomes clay. This has indeed become bu, a foundation, pratishta, resting place. So he thought, whence it became the earth, bhumi, he spread it out, and it became the broad earth, prithvi. Okay, so what you can see is that the waters are either compressed or curdled. What did we have here? Compressed or curdled or solidified or beaten together. And at the same time, heat is involved. For example, the tapas of Prajapati in this Shatapatha Brahmana verse. And what do we have here? It's just solidified. And then in the Yajurveda, let's see, do I have the Yajurveda one here? I guess not. Okay. Wait, let's see. Okay, Taitsuriya. In the Taittiriya Samhita, which is one of the Yajurveda recensions of the Black Yajurveda, and in there we have a retelling of this myth again, and Prajapati becomes wind. It just says Prajapati was there with the waters, and he becomes wind. Right? It's one of these that are really close to the Hebrew creation myth, but he then, when he becomes wind, he sees the goddess, and then like earth comes about. Okay, so, but he is the wind causing this to come about in the primordial waters. So what you can get out of this is that there's this tradition in the Vedic material of either heat or waters or a congealing process or some form of all of those things are what produce from the waters the solidified cosmic egg, which is the first foundation, the first pratishta, right? In the deeps, in the primordial deeps. It's this model, this mythic model that is well ingrained in the Vedic material, and it also is there in the Egyptian material, as we said. And it's echoing through the Rig Veda verse when Indra when Indra makes the floods into the firm places, the Gadhani, in the river. And then there's an abortion that negates that conception. Okay, so you can see that all happening. And so my argument then, of course, is that Exodus 15 verse 8 is directly, it's like word by word almost translating Rig Veda 7.18.5 because, but it's doing so in an extremely advanced way, where it's understanding the subtext, the mythical subtext that I just pointed out, and bringing it to the surface, making it more overt, actually. So it's tying it to the word for conception, the word for a divine conception, where the waters are solidified or curdled. The exact word needed for that is kafa'u, or however you pronounce it. And so that's the word. That's why you have the word congealed there. That is why congealed in the heart of the sea is the phrase found in Exodus 15.8. Because the only way, I'm arguing that, the reason we got that, the reason we ended up with that, is because the adapter is looking at Rig Veda 7.18 verse 5, understanding the subtext, mythically speaking, using the correct conception terminology. He sees that the breaking of the waters out is a miscarriage. Therefore, the firming up is a conception. The waters themselves are being made into that firmness. That should be a conception. When you see it, you can deduce that pretty quickly, and therefore he used this word for the conception, and it refers back to the primordial mound when it emerged in the first moment in the deeps, right? And so let's see, what else can I say? You want to comment on that at all?
I mean, I don't really have specific comments on this topic. Maybe we can look into the Gambhira. Let me actually look it up. This seems interesting.
I will just say, okay, so I wanted to point out, it seems what this makes my mind go to is that the person or people adapting the Rig Veda line and the Rig Veda hymn into Exodus 15 in general, the Song of the Sea, if this is correct, that they saw what was happening in the Rig Veda line, the subtext mythically, they put it together and they made it in their own words, that the waters are solidifying in a conception image into a mound, into a ned. That's the word for a mound, which is referencing the primordial mound, all of that stuff, as Prop even noticed, right? If that's happening, then it's possible that they had one of the glossary handbooks of the time. There were these etymological glossaries that existed at the time, and different handbooks that explained the intertextual references in the Rig Veda itself, so that people someone who wasn't fluent in Vedic terminology, they could look at Gadhani, and it would give a list of the synonyms, and it would give a list of Rig Veda verses, of references where it's kind of like pointing back to and what it kind of means. So it makes me think that the adapter had some kind of handbook like this that was explaining the meaning, the underneath the surface of this Rig Veda hymn that's actually very dense and hard to understand. But that's what it points to. So you have the Nirukta, is this one from where do we have? Let's see, the 6th century BCE, approximately, it existed, and there were lots of others around before him and after him of this type. But the Nirukta is this one that's kind of survived, and it's the systematic creation of a glossary written in archaic Sanskrit prose, which discusses how to understand antiquated, uncommon words used mainly in the Rig Veda. So Yaska chose about 600 stanzas from the Rig Veda and created a well-organized vocabulary to understand the meaning and to interpret particularly the archaic, uncommon words used in the Vedic texts. And then Nirukta is a glossary commenting and explaining the meaning of certain chosen mantras in the Rig Veda. And let's see, it's a semantic interpretation based on their derivation. And so the point being, he may have gone through word by word, dug into what does Arnamshi mean, what does Gadhani mean, and then that would have yielded to him the sort of subtext that this word Gadhani appears usually as to be something that is found in the deeps by Indra. The Gadham is usually found in the Gambhira, which is the deeps, by Indra, right? So it is this, it naturally exists as a contrast against the deeps, and it is a synonym of Pratishta. Those things would have been explained to him in a handbook, like such as one that existed in the Nirukta. And so that's one way to understand how could an adapter possibly have done what I'm saying, what I'm arguing they did. There were handbooks such as this one that we know of, as well as others that Yaska references. And so one explanation is that like a Brahmin himself was the one who helped translate the Sanskrit into Aramaic originally or something. And they had an Aramaic version that was really preserving the mythical meaning in the translation. But the alternate option is that they just had these well-known handbooks of etymology that explain to them the dense allusions in the Rig Veda text itself. And that's why we end up with Congealed in the Heart of the Sea. It's a way of them translating what they see from these handbooks, explaining this Rig Veda line. Okay, so I'll try to stop myself.
And on top of these books, they possibly had access to oral explanation from practitioners of Vedic tradition.
Yeah, this is just one.
It's really easier for us to look at the written text and speculate about the possibilities of oral transmission.
Yeah, this is just one like example of a way to explain it so that it helps people, like, because one thing with what I'm explaining, it's like, how could an adapter have possibly understood that technical subtext if they weren't, so this is just a bridge mentally to say there were lots of things. Actually, there's a whole genre of like etymological explanations of the Vedic mantras and stuff. And so it seems to me that somehow that either somebody who really knew, a Brahmin who already knew, explained it to them and did the translation with them, or they had some handbooks that we know existed. So that's the bridge is there. The bridge is there historically that can explain it. That's all. Okay, so are you looking for something, or should I put your screen?
I mean, no, I was just looking. For instance, the word Gambhira. I mean, it can also mean it can also be the name of a tree, by the way, just because we haven't had enough of trees. And also it can mean naval, voice, or character. So it's pretty much a very ambiguous word, and so I imagine it's one of those words that, if known to the people who were responsible for the cultural transmission, would have been commented at length by the teacher, be it oral or be it a handbook, just as maybe possibly even more so than, say, Stambha would have been, right? Or Gadha in the specific case of the waves.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting. Once again, it's possible that the commenter kind of explained who Indra was, right?
Yeah.
So they could see the similarities between Indra and the various thunder deities of the Near East, and obviously their national thunder deity as Yahweh. So that all plays really nicely as a reconstruction. It plays out nicely. Of course, I do see that many academics might struggle to acknowledge that such kind of cultural transmission might have happened, and there might be an open question: who exactly could have brought it into being, when exactly, where exactly. So much is obviously possibly in need of being ironed out, being researched into even more, but definitely there's a solid foundation and a number of comparisons that are so pervasive that they cannot really be explained without accepting that there is some intertextual relationship between these two, these Vedic passages and the Bible passages.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that caught my mind was I couldn't understand Congealed in the Heart of the Sea, but my mind immediately went to Aditi aborting. I was like, congealing, aborting, like maybe these weird, but that's not. It's like half correct and half wrong, because it's like the congealing moment is the conception, of course, as we said, and the aborting is the aborting moment. But they're both referring back to the same like extended metaphor. One of the Hebrew line is emphasizing the first moment more, using a more obvious conception word, even though it's a flexible word that doesn't have to just mean conception. It means curdling and stuff, but it has a known divine conception usage, so it's a little more clear of what's happening there. And on the other hand, the Vedic line is a little more vague, that the waters becoming firm places holds the mythic slot of the conception, whereas the abortion moment is made more obvious with the word used there for miscarriage. But the other thing that's key there is, well, first of all, what you said. This is why I say this is like a smoking gun. If you accept everything else I already argued. That's sort of a joke, but yeah, this is like based on, if you think the other 19 points of line by line adaptation showed the case that this is probably a direct adaptation, then this is the like cherry on the top clinching moment where you can really go into a line and see Arnamshi, the flowing floods, became Nozelim, the flowing floods, and those Nozelim and Tehomot waters are directly being made into solid solidification, which is actually like a mound, using a word that's like referring to a mound, or even an earthen mound. And the congealing is the perfect word choice for waters becoming solid, especially for a divine influenced conception image. All of that is like you can make a theory where it's almost a word by word thing, but not obviously they changed the word order and different things. They made the Exodus line into a triple structure called like a staircase structure, where it's like one image like repeat, like building on the other, the Nozelim, piled up in a heap. Then the waters, I forget exactly, but yeah, the waters stood up and then the waters congealed in the heart of the sea. Right? It's like a tripartite structure that's not what we find in the Vedic line. So they've made it into their own poetic structure, obviously. But yeah, if you accept if you accept the foundation, then this is like, you can explain all these things that other explanations are not as able to explain. For example, like why use the word for conception? Why use a word that it can mean waters, drying up or solidifying, right? But why use that one that specifically can refer also to a divine conception? That is like a flag. Why have Indra blowing to make this happen? Blowing with wind is part of like the Taittiriya Samhita moment where the earth is made from the waters by Prajapati when he becomes wind. And so it's like there's a few sort of flags that aren't explained as well unless you put your finger on this, which is why I think Prop went this direction as well in his speculation, because the available material that's not Vedic or Egyptian doesn't explain what's happening in its specifics as well. I also found that let's see, there's a lot of. This is interesting. Okay, so incredibly, Prop even suggests that the word in the Exodus line for piled might be too unspecific in that definition of piled for the actual Hebrew word, and that the specific meaning may have been dammed. Thus, the water, in his interpretation, dammed up. And he even cites one comparable word meaning a military dike, pointing uncannily to the dam or dike that seems to be formed in Rigveda 7.18 when the Gadhani are formed, essentially. So he says, quote, piled, this is the word for piled, okay, and I'd have to, it is one of, I can't remember exactly what it is in the Hebrew. So Septuagint, Syriac, and modern translations translate it as piled. Although a verbal root, and I think this was a copy and paste error for RRRT. So I don't think that's the accurate word, but okay. It's this word is otherwise unknown in Hebrew. The meaning is clear from the derived remd, meaning grain pile, and from various Semitic cognates, and from the parallel with stood like a heap. Perhaps, however, piled is not sufficiently specific. We might rather render damned, since this word, rm, apostrophe rm, is used of damning in Syriac, Arabic, and Sabaean. Compare also Akkadian aramu, meaning wharf, ramp, or siege dike. What? So that's a big surprising moment, because what is being formed in the Rig Veda line is like a dam or dike specifically. So if the word actually for piled actually is more accurately the word for damming, it's like almost every word seems like they chose it specifically to match what is going on in the Vedic hymn, and it's not as well explained by other explanations. So and then he says, he cites Jacob, who says, we now have a surprising paradox, a dam of water rather than one which restrains water. Okay, so this is my claim. If this word actually means damned, there's not much more to prove that Exodus 15:8 is directly tied to Rig Veda 7.18.5. Okay. All right. So there is more about just the primordial hill was depicted in Egyptian temples, essentially. And it says that the great wall surrounding the huge temple of Karnak, is laid out in an undulating design. This unusual form is intended to represent the primeval waters which formerly lapped around the temple hill. The primeval hill substantiated the claim of particular temples and cities to antedate all other holy places. And the creator God made his appearance on that primeval hill. It was filled with prodigious energies and vital forces. The dead were portrayed on the primeval hill so that they might be regenerated by its powers. And the pyramids represent huge primeval hills. Okay, so the point is the Egyptian temples that represent the primordial hill, their walls are representing the waters that are walls of water around the primordial hill. So this is a way to see both things happening. The waters solidify into the hill, and there are also walls of water around that hill, okay, in the Egyptian case. So this would be one way to see how both of these images intersect in the primordial hill image, right? So I want to say, in my final argument, is that it's not correct that the waters are merely parting to reveal dry land. The Israelites are actually walking over waters that solidify physically into dry land, into a hill, which is recapitulating the primordial hill from the creation, just like in that Egyptian temple image. And going back to like the magical ritual power or implication of this, one of those can be drawn from what we just read, which is that because this is if you're going back to the primordial moment of creation, you're going back to a place, a location that is charged with prodigious energies and vital forces. So by walking across the primordial hill, the good guys, your side, gets these vital forces, gets regenerated by the powers of the primordial hill, just like the dead are shown to do right here. Okay, so your side gets regenerated by this, whereas those who are aborted in the abortion of the solidified the land or whatever, they get sorted, they get sent to the abyss, right? Essentially, in the ritual sense. Okay, so that could be one reason to reuse this hymn. It's like you're gaining that those vital powers from the primordial mound that you walk across. So I want to leave that as the picture that I'm suggesting is that they're walking across the primordial mound egg and gaining the powers from it, rather than merely the waters parting. But the waters could also be parting, just like in the temple of the Egyptian. Okay, so that's not something that's in the Vedic line though. So that's interesting. All right. There's also stuff with like why the wind is being blown. That's clearly like a reference to the creation and the congealing caused by heat or air or wind. So there's different flags. And then there is a mention in the Shatapatha Brahmana about crossing an ocean by walking on Gadha Pratishta, which is like ford footholds or something, you know? So they're like firm places that you walk across a symbolic ocean. It's a symbolic ocean, and that is the process of the rituals that the ritualist is doing throughout the year, is crossing the ocean. And to do so, they are walking on Gadha Pratishta in the deeps of the ocean that they are symbolically crossing. Therefore, the ritual is a magical way to create these firm places to cross the ocean of the cycle, and doing so, it is some sort of ritual, magical initiation process, or what have you, whatever the ritual is accomplishing. So, all right, those are the main points I wanted to get to. Do you have any last or additional things? And I apologize for rambling on some of that stuff, but yeah, do you have any thoughts on that, Josephus? Or
I think that this was well said and sums up it pretty nicely. I'm liking actually the last comment that I'm seeing in the comment section. Limiting the waters is a central concept in mysticism.
nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a mixture of understanding the waters, navigating the waters, so maybe fording them in the way that Moses and Sudas with their respective peoples do, and obviously also the matter of separating the good waters from the bad waters, such as in the ritual of Trita Aptya, that I think is overall echoed, even if not too directly, in the instance of Sudas and Vasishtha, and thus ultimately in Genesis, in Exodus. So the idea that you still separate the waters effects. Waters can do anything. They can be used to fit any container. They can nourish. They can destroy. So obviously, a central concept for any tradition would be figuring out how to use those waters to your own benefit. And if your enemy's gotta catch the short end of the water stick, so be it.
Right. Exactly. So it clearly has power. You know what they're invoking, the imagery, the process, the whole process of going, you know, of it emerging and then walking across it and breaking to kill their enemies. All that. Clearly, it's powerful. It's invoking something. It's sending you back to the primordial moment, and that is all that Mircea Eliade concept of the eternal return to the primordial moment, where you are regenerated by the mythical, the powers of being in the mythical space in the time before, right? And so yeah, there are reasons why these hymns last so long and are seen as worth adapting, I would argue. So okay, all right, and yeah, thanks for discussing with me, Josephus. I gotta get going. So yeah, I really appreciate you digging into this just off the cuff. I didn't even ask Josephus about this topic to talk with me about it today. So he just jumped in here and was cool to just start digging in without anything prepared. So I really appreciate that, because I know this is like technical stuff. I'm not a technical wizard on linguistics and stuff, so I don't mind doing that. But I appreciate Josephus being okay with just going into it and looking at these things, because one of the fascinating things is that I'm not an expert in these languages, but what I'm trying to show is that like with the handbook concept, the person translating this, I'm sort of trying to take people on the linguistic journey where you don't where the translator didn't necessarily have to be okay. Clearly, like they knew something. The adapter knew something, and who knows how many layers of translation there were. How many like it could have been translated into Aramaic and kept by the Persians, and then later gotten by the Hebrews, who then adapted it to the Song of the Sea. Right. So obviously, the initial translators knew a lot about what they were translating in terms of the language. But the point is, like, there are ways that handbooks could exist to explain subtext, explain difficult words to people who didn't necessarily, who weren't fluent, who weren't trained Brahmins, who actually were at a knowledge deficit. And if somebody like myself can make a plausible, like show the plausible pathway of how that could have connected, that shows how ancient scribes even more easily could have done that, I think, with handbooks and with the aid of Brahmins, or whatever the case may have been, multiple steps of translation, perhaps. It was very, very doable. And so I think that it's a technical subject, but at least my argument, like anybody can see the steps and what I'm talking about, I hope. Okay. All right. I appreciate you guys for taking the time to listen. And I very much appreciate Josephus for humoring me and helping me along with this. And so, yeah, have a great day, everyone. And thanks again, Josephus. I'll hopefully see you next time for maybe a more prepared and organized talk or something.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you to anyone who watched and commented. And we'll definitely see each other for another live stream, hopefully next week.
All right. Thanks so much. All right. Bye-bye.